LA Kings fans continue to debate trades, past and present. We are talking about the future of Drew Doughty in LA and much more on another fan feedback edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Join all the action at FanDuel.com and play daily dingers to make your free pick on who's hitting a homer this Major League Baseball season. It is time for our weekly feature where we let you sound off on anything LA Kings related. It could be something that we've talked about on our shows this week or any other week, or it could be something you just need to get off your chest or a question you want to ask. It is your show, and it's my favorite show of the week, and I think it's one of our most popular shows. And we begin with someone who has been our leadoff hitter for the last few weeks. It is Go Big or Go Home Keith, and he is still in parts unknown, and he is still convinced that the LA Kings should have traded Anze Kopitar and Drew Doughty at the end of the 2018-19 season. So he says, to cap off our disagreement on this, the Kings not trading both Anze Kopitar and Drew Doughty at the end of the 2018-19 season has relegated them to becoming a barely there playoff team that keeps losing in the first round. The team would have gotten more assets, which could have made them better now. Their last 5 seasons were 2 humiliating first-round playoff losses to arch rival San Jose in 5 games, including losing every home game, and Vegas swept by an expansion team and missing the playoffs 3 times. Sorry that wasn't enough losing in your sight then, and if that's the case, then I guess both GM Dean Lombardi and Coach Daryl Sutter shouldn't have been fired. Yes, I've used revisionist history too, which I don't think should be condemned too much given that we still learn from it, but still history nonetheless. And if we shouldn't adopt that mentality, then I guess Luc Robitaille shouldn't be held accountable for the team's 7 first-round losses and 5 missed playoffs since 2014. Yet I recall you've said that he should be fired for that. Revisionist history doesn't take away from the fact that mistakes were made during this time. Compare GM Dave Taylor's, yes, he drafted Brown, Quick, and Kopitar, and Blake's retools to Dean Lombardi's rebuild, where the latter's approach led to Stanley Cups. Finally, I'm well aware that teams won't give away good players, but history shows that most of the time teams don't get 100% fair value in return, so both you and any other critics of my trades should remember that too. And that is Go Big or Go Home Keith. So, just to kind of recap what you're saying here, you believe the LA Kings should have traded their 2 greatest players at their positions in the history of the franchise in their prime. You think that would have been a good idea? What do you think fans would have thought at the time? Particularly season ticket holders would have thought of that move at the time. What do you think the media would have thought of that move at the time? I'm pretty sure that it would have been destroyed by the fans and whatever media was paying attention. You don't, like, nobody does this. Even though the Kings had not won a playoff series in a few years, trading your 2 best players and 2 pillars of your organization is a bad idea. And you would be doing it with no guarantee it would help you. Now, you think it will help you. You think you're going to get all these great prospects and picks in return. How did the Kings do when they had supposedly the 2 best draft classes 2 years in a row? That didn't work out. And the experts said we had all these great young players that were going to help us be better. It didn't work. So it's just and again, you say, we learn from history. That's true. We certainly do. But I find it hard to believe that at the time you felt like this is what they should do. Now, looking back on it, you can say, well, look at all these years that we haven't had a first-round playoff win, and we should have done something drastic back then. Well, you know that now, but you didn't know it then. So I was trying to think of an example of a team that's done this. But I can't come up with a team having done this because I don't think it's ever been done. Has a team in the history of the NHL traded its all-time best forward and its all-time best defenseman in the same season? I don't think it's ever happened. So again, it would have been completely destroyed by everyone and anyone except you, I guess. And if that's the way you felt about it at the time, okay, I can't argue with you about it, but it wasn't going to happen. No team would ever do this because it's an insane idea. And again, you're doing it thinking that you might be better, but there's no guarantee you're going to be better. And meanwhile, you've just hit the eject button on 2 future Hall of Famers in their primes. It doesn't seem like a very good plan to try and make your team better to me. And I don't really understand how holding players and GMs accountable for what the team has done, how that's related to making some kind of insane trade, a few seasons into, what has now become, yes, a lack of success. But I also don't think, like I said, the Kings have not been the worst team in the NHL over this span. There's been playoff utility for sure, but I don't know. I think, Keith, we will never agree on this idea. If you can come up with a situation in sports where a team has done something like this, I'd love to hear about it. I don't think a team has ever done it because it's just a crazy idea. Andy in Guelph checks in. He says, enjoyed the goalie discussion in the latest episode. I think Anton Forsberg is the easiest move to clear cap space, if in fact that's the goal. I think most teams wouldn't want to take Darcy's 1-year cap hit unless it was at the deadline, and he's proven to be consistent. I like to see Portillo be given a chance, as I truly believe one of Hammer and George will be trade bait next season for a difference maker at center. If I'm moving Portillo, it's for this type of move. Moore, Dumoulin, or Edmondson, Portillo, and 2 second-round picks for Alexander Nikishin. I think Carolina would welcome Portillo over their other goalies because of who they already have in the pecking order in goal. If the Kings were able to take a swing now, fix the D next offseason, and get Adam Fantilli, truth is, I'm prepared for them to start as is. And that was Andy in Guelph. Well, the talk is Fantilli is going to sign a long-term deal in Columbus before the season. Now, I'm sure he'll have a no-trade clause because everybody gets those. We'll see. It hasn't happened yet, so it's never final until it's final, but that's what I hear, that Columbus is going to re-sign him before the year. I think Carolina could look for some insurance in net based on what they've got, although what they've got also does include a goalie who helped them win the Stanley Cup this year. But again, there's not a proven long-term goaltender there, and Portillo isn't that either, but maybe they're looking for some more depth. I don't know what they've got in their system there, but maybe. The thing with Nikishin is, from what I've heard, is Carolina wants whatever team that acquires Nikishin to also take off their hands the contract of Jesperi Kotkaniemi. He's signed for the next 4 years. He's making $4.8 million per season, and he's a third-line winger, and they would like him off their team. So, and then the Kings would also have to re-sign Nikishin, who's a restricted free agent. So maybe it's a sign and trade, but they also probably have to take on a contract as well. So it's kind of, obviously, the part of it is what the Kings would get up, but it's also what they're willing to take on in the case of Alexander Nikishin. Raphael in LA says, I believe the Kings should pursue a move that includes Trevor Moore, Brian Dumoulin, Joel Edmondson, and first and second round picks for a top 6 center. I understand that the center market is very shallow right now, which means that sacrifices will need to be made. I would like to see the Kings pursue Matthew Barzal or Elias Pettersson, mainly because they have been struggling. Point production has been lower than expected for them, which leads me to believe that their trade value might take a hit. Very optimistic to see what the trade deadline could bring of the numerous superstars and all-stars that are free agents to come, and whether Ken Holland will make a splash if there is a guaranteed extension coming with it. Best wishes, and that's Raphael in LA. I don't see, well, in the case of Matthew Barzal, who I think had 75 points last year, so I don't know that I would consider that struggling. I think in the case of Matthew Barzal, who the Islanders have said is not on the market, but hey, things change. I think it would take more than like the first and second round picks, sure, but throwing in middle six and bottom pairing defensemen, the Islanders don't want that. That's not going to help them. They might consider a top six winger like a Kevin Fiala or Alex Ferrier, along with picks and prospects as well. But like Trevor Moore and guys like that and Joel Edmondson, I don't see that getting it done for a top six center. And for Elias Pettersson, maybe, but Pettersson's about taking on that contract. 5 years, $11.6 million per season. How much of Vancouver is going to hold on to that deal? Yeah, I think the Canucks would absolutely trade him for what you're proposing if the Kings take on all that contract, which I would not be in favor of them doing. Steve in San Diego says, a year or so ago, I was at an event where two very high-level Kings execs were standing around and talking to a group of us. They were talking about Q as if there was no question that he would replace Kopitar as the 1C and wear the C on his jersey. They were emphatic. Granted, it was before last season was completed, but I can't overemphasize how high they were on Q. One other thing, do you ever get backlash from the Kings execs or players like Drew when you criticize them pretty hard? And that was Steve in San Diego. Do I criticize them pretty hard? I don't think so. I don't think saying that Drew Doughty needs to have his minutes reduced and play a lesser role, I don't think that's controversial. It might be with Drew, but I don't think that's a hot take personally. I had a colleague of mine in radio say, hey, you never know who's listening, and you should keep that in mind whenever you say something into a microphone. And I think that's probably good advice. So sure, there may be people in the Kings organization who have heard this show before. I doubt that they listen to it every day. And Drew Doughty has no idea who I am. Trust me, I'm not that big of a deal. So no one has ever talked to me. And the only people that I ever deal with in the organization are like the media relations people. So no, never had any kind of backlash on anything I say. And like I said, I really don't think I say a lot of controversial stuff, but that's me. As far as Quinton Byfield goes, and whenever somebody says, that someone was sure about him, I think we had a guest on named Heidi Kalakesh. He was at the time the host of Locked On NHL Prospects. And I had asked him, this was a couple of years ago, what did he think about Quinton Byfield? And he said, in 3 years, Quinton Byfield will be the best player on the LA Kings. And I'm pretty sure last year was the third year, and he wasn't the best player on the LA Kings. So that prediction was a little off, but he wasn't the only one that had that idea. I do think this year is huge for Q, especially if he's given the number one center position and he's playing between a couple of really good wingers. I don't think it means that he's either star or bust, but I think it will go a long way in us coming to the conclusion that he's going to be a great player or just a player. We'll see. We have some opinions on Drew Doughty's next contract and more. That's next on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Locked On LA Kings is brought to you by FanDuel. Baseball fans, if you think you know who's hitting a homer today, FanDuel is giving you a free chance to call your shot with daily dingers. It's easy to play. Just make your free pick on who you think will hit a home run in their game. If you're right, you'll receive a profit boost to use on your next bet for a chance at extra winnings. Best of all, you can make a free pick every day throughout the MLB season. Daily Dingers is another fun way to stay engaged with every day's games, whether you're following your favorite team or keeping an eye on matchups across the league. Every game has someone capable of going deep, and now you get a chance to make your prediction before the first pitch. Sometimes it's a hitter who's on a hot streak. Maybe it's a favorable pitching matchup or even a ballpark that gives up a lot of homers. Those are things I look at when I make my picks for Daily Dingers. So are you ready to play your game today? Join all the action at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com to play Daily Dingers and make your free pick on who is hitting a homer. Play ball and swing for the fences on FanDuel, the official partner of Major League Baseball. Callum in Utah, exclamation point, is checking in. I mean, he wrote Utah, exclamation point. So I guess I have to kind of say it like that. He says, talking about contracts, just curious, how was Drew Doughty's contract? I think it was on your podcast that Kempe's contract is good, but could age poorly. How was Doughty's contract when it was first signed? Obviously, now it's aged really poorly. Also, a thought at center for the season. I could see Kempe mainly being the center, and I'm kind of with you on where I'd rather see Laferriere be center, but do you think they could go back and forth where Kempe's center and then Laferriere, or do you think it will be one or the other with very little changes? I just had the thought that they could switch off because I feel like Kempe would be better at center, but he's more reluctant to play center. Love the show. Thank you, Callum in Utah. Drew Doughty's contract at the time he signed it was for an elite defenseman, which he was at the time he signed it. I also think the Kings had an expectation, I'm sure Drew Doughty did as well, that the end of his contract, yeah, he'd be overpaid, but in between, it would be fine. But unfortunately for Drew Doughty, when he signed his 8-year deal, he was second in the Norris Trophy voting that year. The following year, he was 19th. And then the 2 years after that, he got no votes for the Norris Trophy. So a pretty steep drop-off in how Drew Doughty was viewed as an elite defenseman, and that obviously made the contract not as good as it seemed to be at the time that he signed it. I think Kempe's contract is a good one, and I think it will be fine as time goes along and the salary cap goes up. Eric checks in Wrightwood, which is up in the mountains north of San Bernardino, which I had to look up. I know he's emailed before, but I always when I hear of a place or see a place that I'm not familiar with, I have to look it up. It's just my thing. He says, good day, Eddie. I just read an article that former LA King goalie Kelly Hrudey's contract will not be picked up by Sportsnet in Canada. I would love to have his voice and presence on Kings broadcasts, as he was one of my favorite players growing up and one of the best Canadian broadcasters, in my opinion. Just wondering if you've heard of any changes or updates on the Kings broadcast in general. Keep up the fine work you do for the kingdom. And that was Eric in Wrightwood. Thank you, Eric. I talked about this in a previous episode, and I think this was probably after Eric had already sent this email in, but I definitely agree. I think that Kelly Hrudey would be a tremendous addition to the Kings broadcast crew. I have not heard if the Kings have reached out to him. I would hope that they would have, but I don't know that. And as we talked about in the previous episode, Jim Fox is taking a lesser role, probably stepping away at some point in the next couple of seasons. I think, don't know that, but I think that. I think Kelly Hrudey would be a great addition to the Kings broadcast crew. I hope they've reached out and at least talked to him about it. I don't know if he's definitely would be interested in it or not. I'm sure he'll have some options because I agree. I think he's really talented at what he does. Brian number 1 in Huntington Beach, California says, last week I asked you if you could name a former King, and you were correct. It was Kevin Stevens. And based on everything I've read, he was indeed drafted by LA in 1983. But can you name this former King? A center, drafted by the St. Louis Blues in the 7th round, 172nd overall in the 1994 draft. In 1996, he was traded to LA along with 2 other players, Patrice Tardif and Craig Johnson, and 2 draft picks for Wayne Gretzky. Some considered him to be the key piece in the trade for Gretzky. However, he was traded in 1998 to Colorado for another former King, Eric Lacroix. This player's brother, a defenseman, also played for the Kings from 1995 to 1998. He wore number 12. Can you name this former King? Bonus points if you could name his brother as well. Thanks for another great week of shows, especially during the slow time of the season. And that was Brian number 1 in Huntington Beach. Well, Brian, I'm 2 for 2 on your Name That King question, so I want to keep my streak going. All right, so the first name that popped in my head when thinking St. Louis Blues and brothers was the Courtnall brothers, Jeff and Russ. But I do not remember them being a part of the Gretzky trade, and I think it was another brother that was a part of it, one of the Vopat brothers. So I believe it is either Jan Vopat or Roman Vopat, but I'll be honest, I'm not completely sure which one. So I'm going to go with my first gut impression. I'm going to guess Roman Vopat is the answer. I'm not going to look it up. I will wait for your email next week, but I am enjoying this, by the way. And I have to mention this. Every time I hear the name Kevin Stevens, he had a notorious nickname, which was Crack Monster. And yes, it's for what you think. He had some serious drug issues. I believe he got sober, and I believe he's still working in the Penguins organization. But yeah, Kevin Stevens had some real dark times and was arrested a number of times and went to rehab a bunch of times. Yeah, it's too bad that when I think of that name, I think of that, but I can't help it. That's what I do. It just pops in my head. Everydayer Dave in Cornell checks in. I looked this one up as well. It's also up in the mountains, is west of Calabasas, Cornell. And he says, we're obviously in the dog days of summer, so it seems an obvious time to raise an aspect of ice hockey culture that never fails to make me laugh. The obvious obsession hockey has with the word obviously. Players and commentators alike just fire off obviously like a drunken mascot with a t-shirt cannon, pulling that trigger with the same verb and an equal measure of precision. Obviously does service in hockey moments as diverse as well. To win, we obviously need to score more goals, all the way to hot prospect Barfgrud Zunderlund, who obviously plays with the Yukon Moose Knuckles and is a wizard on the hurdy-gurdy, obviously. Meanwhile, clearly, and as we know, and evidently, languish in the minors, waiting for their call-up, which obviously never comes. So keep the obviously's coming, hockey world, and I'll keep a smile on my face. Keep up the great work, Eddie, and go Kings go. And that was Everydayer Dave checking in from Cornell. And I'm pretty sure what he's referring to is I did an episode where I was quoting Adrian Kempe and Alex Laferriere, and I do remember they did use the word obviously an awful lot. And I will admit, I had probably overused it as well. It's one of those words that when you're thinking of the next word, if there's like a hesitation on what a word is that you want to use, just throw an obviously in there, and it buys you a couple extra seconds before you can think of the next word. So I'm as guilty as anyone. I know I've used obviously probably way too much. So I'm keeping that hockey tradition going. Sheldon in Westchester says, "Hey, Eddie, I've been an everyday listener for the past few years, and I've enjoyed your work as it has gotten me through many days of being stuck in LA traffic." Thank you, Sheldon. Wanted to ask you how you felt about the new rumored Kings hometown remix uniforms that should be unveiled as the season gets closer. It's been rumored to be purple with black, white, and gold accents. As someone who has based my everyday closet on all the Kings colors over the years, that being purple or forum blue, gold, black, silver, and white, I have to say I absolutely would love if these uniforms had all my favorite colors all in one Kings jersey, which is a bit of a personal dream of mine. Similarly, I love the Reigns new rebrand. I want to know your thoughts on what this jersey could look like. And that was Sheldon in Westchester. Sheldon also included a mock-up of the jersey, which I should have pulled and showed on the YouTube channel, but it's out there. You can find it if you're really interested. And look, I've said many times on this show, I love the color purple. I wish it was the primary color for the LA Kings. I also love the rebrand of the Ontario Reign. I already ordered one of the Reign jerseys for this year. Seeing this mock-up, my first impression is I don't hate it, but I don't love it either. I got to reserve my judgment until I actually see it in person. I know me, and I'm a sucker, and I'll probably buy the jersey. I'll probably end up liking it, but just based on what I've seen, I do have to admit, I don't love it. I don't hate it. I'm not sure at this point, so we'll see. I did want to, as a bona fide jersey nerd, I did want to say we've been talking about the LA Monarchs over the last few episodes. Ed and Brea brought it up a few episodes ago, talking about hockey history in LA. And I just happened to look up, I was curious what the LA Monarchs jerseys looked like. And I was very delighted to see that they were purple and gold. And it's kind of a very understated crown that says Monarchs on it. But I found the jersey online and you can buy it, and I bought it. I thought it was unique. I liked it. It's still LA Kings like. So I'll show it off once it finally shows up here on the show. We are talking hockey villains. We'll do that next here on Locked In LA Kings, your team every day. All right, wrapping it up with your emails. And this comes from Will. He is in Guildford. I hope I said that right. Or Guildford, Surrey in the UK. He says, longtime Kings fan, but first time emailing in. Will, I hope it's not the last time. Thanks for checking in. He says, I went to the deciding game in the first round of the playoffs against St. Louis while on honeymoon in LA in 2013, and I've supported the Kings ever since. I'm hopeful we'll get some further personnel changes in the D group before the regular season starts, but here's how I would sum up the current situation. Concerns. We haven't replaced Kopitar. QB might be that guy, but the next 12 months is huge for him. Our blue line is one of the weakest amongst the contenders in the Pacific. We have question marks in net, and we don't have the cap space or assets to fix any of the above anytime soon. The positives. We have one of the best groups of wingers in the league. Brandt Clark is a legit talent and must be given the minutes he deserves. I like the Peter Laviolette appointment, not just in his resume, but his style of play. And we picked up some solid forwards in free agency that will look even better if we move them for assets at the trade deadline. My hope is that this coming season triggers the change required with Drew Doughty and Darcy Kuemper's contracts expiring next summer. As for Doughty, as brutal as it may sound, if he's not open to a team-friendly contract, in my opinion, we should let him walk. This upcoming season feels like a step into the unknown in some ways. Let's hope we are pleasantly surprised. Massive thanks to your work on the pod. You do a tremendous job. All the best, and go Kings go. And that was Will in the UK. Thank you, Will. I really appreciate those words. And I will say, Will, your first email to the show was awesome. I don't know that I have any issue at all with any of your concerns or your positives for the Kings. I think I would agree with all of those. As for Drew Doughty, I agree with your thoughts on him. As much as I've loved him and have been a fan of his and would really like to see him end his career in LA, we're going to have to wait and see how he plays this year and how he responds to what I think will be a lesser role and how he feels about going forward with the LA Kings. I think the success of the team certainly is a factor in that as well. I could see him. You're right. He needs to take a lesser role. He needs to take a pretty team-friendly deal. And look, he's been frankly overpaid for quite a while. So it's not like he hasn't been living high on the hog for a while. And I'm hoping he's set up for the rest of his life. It shouldn't be about money at this point. But when you're a player of a certain stature, we'll talk about a statue coming up. It's about respect, right? And you feel like if you take a certain term that you're not getting respected for what you've done in the past. I look at Brent Burns in Colorado. He's like $1 million a year player playing on the third pairing as the oldest guy in the league. Obviously, he was a really, really standout player at one time. Probably not as good as Drew Doughty once was. I don't think Brent Burns ever won a Norris, but I could be wrong about that. But that's the kind of role I see Drew Doughty taking as his season goes along. If he still wants to play, and I know he has a great passion for the sport of hockey, Brent Burns taking $1 million to play on a really good team in Colorado, I don't think he feels disrespected by that. I think that it is where he is in his career, and he's probably happy playing on a good team. Maybe Drew Doughty will take $1 million to play on some upper echelon team that would like a Hall of Famer and Cup winner kind of as part of their crew. Dr. Frank Paul in Yucca Valley checks in. He says, Dear Eddie, my villain, remember we had an episode about hockey villains. My villain is unquestionably Darnell Nurse. He typifies the obscenely dirty player that the old NHL considered to be an unacceptable part of the game. This is an overpaid player who makes a living by covering up for his inconsistently demonstrated hockey skills. I'm sure I read that word wrong. With dirty play as evidenced by his previous 4 NHL suspensions and having also received a maximum allowable fine from the NHL for the interference call on Kyle Burroughs in 2022. I'll never be able to burn from my memory the sight of Darnell Nurse putting the headlock on Byfield and potentially lethally riding him to the ice face first, and then finishing it off by cross-checking Byfield in the base of the skull in April of 2025. I cannot even try to rationalize his headbutting of Philip Deneau in the 2022 playoffs. What he cannot do with his stick skills, he makes up for with vicious slashes like the one on Rope Hentz in 2025. And that was Dr. Frank Paul in Yucca Valley, who is no fan of Darnell Nurse. And I'm sure he was not happy when there was that scuttlebutt about Nurse maybe being reunited with Ken Holland, who signed him to that big deal in Edmonton. But thankfully that did not happen. But Nurse will still be around. He'll still be potentially a thorn in the side of the Kings as he's now wearing the teal of the Pacific Division rival San Jose Sharks. Our next email comes from Fred in Orange, and he says, "Hello, Eddie. You're doing great this summer." Thank you, Fred. Today you had a guess the King. When you said goalie and you said he was in the news, I immediately guessed Kelly for not getting his contract renewed, Kelly Hrudey. As you might recall, I mostly listened to the Kings getting Josh Schaefer's calls on the radio. A couple of days ago, in an article lamenting Kelly losing his job, I mentioned that the trend is to cut back on radio calls. The article mentioned how radio calls of hockey provide the eyes and ears to the listener. My opinion, there are so many great radio broadcasters in hockey. Such a very hard sport to call, may well be the toughest. Your thoughts? Too many goalies? Probably not. Let's see how Darcy does, though, through American Thanksgiving. Might be worth trading, or if he's back to his 2025 Darcy, maybe Anton could be traded. Or keep both of them and consider trading a rain goalie and keep Portillo ready to come to the NHL for us. Finally, villains. I did a Google search asking whether Dustin Brown was considered a dirty player. The search engine responded, he walked the line between clean aggression and dirty play, making him one of the most polarizing and debated players in the NHL. I remember him making a questionable hit against the Coyotes. I think it was Michael Roosevelt in the playoffs. Tomas Sandstrom, strong reputation as being an abrasive pest. The opposing villains, I recall, were Craig Muni, who broke a King's leg and sprained another teammate's knee. Definitely Dirty Birdie. Last for today, Theo Fleury. Not dirty per se, but just pint-sized. I'd yell at him on my TV back when we were on Prime Ticket. Stand up, you midget. Hope I haven't offended any size-challenged fellow listeners. Thanks so much for this long one. Go Kings go. I'm looking at Kelly Hrudey's photos. Man, the guy looks great for 65 years old. And that was Fred in Orange. Sorry about that, Fred. On my other podcast that I do, the Puck Podcast, I lamented that the Columbus Blue Jackets just fired their longtime radio guy. I think it was 17 years he'd been doing it. And I am totally biased on this. I'm an old radio guy, and I think it is a huge disservice to your fan base to have simulcasts because it's not the same. It's cheap, and I hate it. But cost cutting is cost cutting, and that's one of the things a lot of teams are doing. They're having the simulcast. Now, when the Kings did the simulcast, at least they had Nick Nixon doing a radio call on TV. So if you're going to do it, which I don't want him to do, but if you're going to do it, at least do that. I'm thankful the Kings have Josh Schaefer doing the radio calls and have John Kelly doing the TV calls. I don't like the simulcast. Again, I think it's a disservice to your listeners. Calling a hockey game or any other sporting event on the radio and calling it on TV are two completely different things, and they should be treated completely different. So again, I'm biased. I think there should be radio broadcasters for the audio calls and TV broadcasters for the TV calls. And I'm glad the Kings haven't gone this way yet, but I also wouldn't be shocked if they eventually go this way because a lot of teams are doing this. What else? I think the Google, what did you do? Maybe you did some kind of a Google search on Dustin Brown. I think that's fair. I think he did walk the line a lot. And anytime you're on the line, eventually you're going to step over occasionally, but I don't think he was ever like an intentionally dirty player. I really don't. I've always said that, and people have disagreed with me, and that's fine. And yeah, Kelly Hrudey, and Jim Fox. I mean, how good does Jim Fox look in his, I think he's 66 going on 67, looking good. Kelly Hrudey too. You're right. Ed and Brea is back. So call off the wellness check on Ed and Brea. And he closes out saying, yes, last week I was busy with work and stuff, and now the closer is back. A closer needs to rest here and there. First off, Sunday will be the anniversary of maybe the GOAT trade in sports history, as Wayne Gretzky was traded to the LA Kings from our rivals, the Edmonton Oilers. The trade shocked and changed the NHL forever. Because of this trade, non-traditional markets like Florida, Tampa Bay, San Jose, and Anaheim, etc., were formed. Hockey was at its fever level in SoCal during the Gretzky years. After that, it has not been until the Kings Cup years, and it did not match the Gretzky era. Congrats to Anze Kopitar on having his number retired and his statue put up next season. By the way, if you didn't hear that, yes, it was announced that Anze Kopitar will have his number 11 retired and a statue unveiled outside the arena February the 24th, 2027 against the Montreal Canadiens. Ed continues. As for Jonathan Quick, I heard the Kings are not going to honor Quick for a while. First, he is committed to the Rangers now as goalie coach. And second, I heard that Quick and Luc Robitaille do not get along and maybe have some beef. Sadly, I did not see Quick getting honored during Luke's tenure. I expect Drew Doughty to get his number and statue before Quick. Also sad to hear another 32 goalie for the Kings, Kelly Hrudey, was let go by Sportsnet. He's a good guy and a mentor for mental health stuff. Hopefully he gets a gig with the Kings broadcast since he and Luke were teammates. I also met Peter Laviolette at a fun season ticket gathering, and I asked him about the goalie situation, and what he told me was he's leaning towards a tandem situation of Darcy Kuemper and Anton Forsberg. In other words, equal share of competition. Continue the good work. Go Kings go. And that was Ed in Brea with potentially some inside information from head coach Peter Laviolette. Like I said, we may have to do an episode about the Gretzky thing. Maybe I can get a guest on who was around during that era and get his take on, as Ed said, maybe the biggest trade in the history of hockey and one of the biggest trades in sports history. So that anniversary is apparently coming up on this weekend. As far as Jonathan Quick, I hope the Kings have reached out to him. I hope they have said, hey, we're honoring Anze Kopitar on this date. We'd love to do you as well, but it's up to you. It's up to you when you want to do it. Let us know and we'll work out a date, but we want to honor you the way you need to be honored. I hope they've reached out and I hope they've said that. I've never heard that Jonathan Quick has any kind of personal beef with Luc Robitaille. Obviously, the way things ended, there's no doubt there are hard feelings between Quick and the Kings organization. But again, hopefully that can all get settled soon. Hopefully he can be honored the way he needs to be honored, and we can all have a pleasant resolution to Jonathan Quick's LA Kings career. Hey, thank you to everyone who took the time to email the show. This show is literally not possible without your participation. Thank you to everyone who took the time to send an email. For you everydayers, those who listen and watch Locked On the Kings every day, did want to announce we are not having the Everydayer Club anymore. We were given the option to take it over ourselves or decline to do it, and I declined to do it anymore. I didn't want to take it over. So if you happen to be an Everyday Club member and you paid for your service, you can get a refund on that. If you want any more information on that, reach out, email me, and I'll be happy to pass that along. But we're not doing the Everydayer Club that we had for a little while. The email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. You're always welcome to post your thoughts. If you're watching on YouTube in the comment section, stay connected with the show on social media, X, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We are at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thanks for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network, your team every day. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you next time. And as always, go Kings go.